and in person. I am so glad we're going to get to share in this study together. And so, let's turn to Numbers, book of Numbers. You're like, man, is there a book called Numbers? Yes, there is. Right? It's the fourth book of your Bible. It is the fourth book of your Bible. We're going to go to Numbers chapter 12. That's where we're starting. Numbers 12. Okay? Numbers chapter 12. And we're going to explore deeper this journey in not bearing false witness. And Tina, I will do a better job this week. So those of you online who were very kind last week, I will do a better job responding this week. Okay, Numbers chapter 12. When we're talking about bearing false witness, I want to identify some components of this. One way to bear false witness is to literally promote a hoax, right? So some of you remember about 5 years ago, there was an internet group who actually purposefully did this. There's a singer, super popular entertainer named Drake, okay? Super, super popular. So this group planned a hoax to prove how the internet functions, to spread false witness, and they published Drake is dead. Some of you remember this. So within a day, there are 17 million hits on the announcement, Drake is dead. Well, then a major news network picked up off the internet that Drake is dead and published his day of death as the day before, right? Well, you know, if you've been watching the Toronto Raptors play basketball, Drake is on the courtside seat, right? So Drake's famous statement was this: news to me. That's how he responded, news to me. But what ended up happening is, because it was kind of like one of these things that's just like kind of mind-blowing, the original group that did it was interviewed. The ones that started it, they admitted to it. And they said it was an intentional hoax to demonstrate how these stories, listen carefully, this is super important, this part, in repetition, then take on the nature of truth. Okay? Did you hear that part? In repetition, take on the nature of truth. So, one of our former elders and dear friend, Don Huff, hey Malia, Don Huff, a few weeks ago, he sent me this text and he said, have you read this book? And I mentioned it last week. I had not read the book. It's brand new. It's called Collective Illusions, okay, by Dr. Todd Rose. And the Drake story is deep into the book. So I came across it. It is deep. He chronicles it. But the part of that book that he's talking about is scientific data on the way that repetition of a false narrative impacts our doubting of ourselves. Okay? So we have this little thing that says, what? How many of you have had that moment where you thought, that can't be right? Right? Somebody said something and you're like, that can't be right. But if it's repeated, as the data demonstrates, over and over and over and over and over again, there's nothing added to the case. But it's the impact of the repetition on us doubting our own capacity to think about it, process it, research it, and make an informed decision. Okay? So if you look at Numbers chapter 12, that's the first example we're going to look at. And this is a case of bearing false witness within a family. Everybody ready? Numbers 12. Miriam and Aaron. No, those are the older siblings of Moses. So Miriam is the oldest, then Aaron, and then 3 years later, Moses was born. Okay? they began to talk against Moses because of his Cushite wife, for he had married a Cushite. Here's what they said. This is what they were circulating. Has the Lord spoken only through Moses, they asked? Hasn't he spoken also through us? But notice this fascinating comment in the text at the end of verse 2. The Lord heard the story they were circulating, the insinuation. Bible says Moses was a very humble man, more humble than anyone else on the face of the earth. You might think, well, who put that in there? Well, you know that the 5 books of Moses were not all written by Moses because his death is recorded. Moses didn't come back from the grave and write the ending, right? So there are other people that contributed. So someone contributes to this story, and you all need to know Moses is incredibly humble, and this story is about to illustrate his humility as well. Ready? At once, the Lord said to Moses, Aaron, and Miriam, come out to the tent of meeting, all 3 of you. So all 3 of them went out. Then the Lord came down in a pillar of cloud. He stood at the entrance to the tent and summoned Aaron and Miriam. When the 2 of them stepped forward, he said, this is the Lord, listen to my words. When there's a prophet among you, I, the Lord, reveal myself to them in visions, and I speak to them in dreams. But this is not true of my servant Moses. He is faithful in all my house. With him, I speak face to face, clearly, and not in riddles. He sees the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses? The anger of the Lord burned against them, and he left them. But when the cloud lifted from the tent, Miriam's skin was leprous. It became white as snow. Aaron turned toward her and saw that she had defiling skin disease. And he said to Moses, please, my Lord, I ask you not to hold this sin against us that we have so foolishly committed. Don't let her be like a stillborn infant coming out of its mother's womb with its flesh half eaten away. So Moses cried out to the Lord, please, God, heal her. And the Lord replied to Moses, if her father had spit in her face, would she not have been in disgrace for 7 days? Confine her outside the camp for 7 days, and after that she can be brought back. So Miriam was confined outside the camp for 7 days, and the people did not move on until she was brought back. And after that, the people left for Hazeroth and encamped in the desert of Paran. Now, you understand why they plugged in Moses was humble. That could have gone a lot of ways, right? You realize if somebody talks bad about you and God shows up on your side, there's a lot of leverage there, right? Can we admit that? But Moses, because of his humility, his concern is that God be glorified and that he demonstrate the kind of life he's supposed to live. So that's what ends up happening. But do you notice that Moses and Miriam and Aaron don't like something Moses did, so they start talking bad about him. Now that's the key thing, isn't it? Now real quickly, some people would look at this text and think, hey, I've done the geography on this, I've investigated the geography, and I know where this woman is from. She's from modern day Sudan and Ethiopia. Right? So the fact that she's a woman of color stands out. That stands out. But I want to argue something different. I honestly don't believe that's the big issue, and here's why. Where did the people of Israel live for the previous 400 years? In Egypt. Okay? Who actually controlled Egypt for several centuries? Nubia. So the idea that people of lighter and darker skin were around each other all the time and even married to each other, that wasn't necessarily the biggest issue that was going on. What you need to bear in mind is that this woman from Cush represents the enemy, represents the other. They're people that conquered. It would be a little bit like, many of you are familiar with this, but it would be a little bit like in the decades after the Second World War, the hatred that people from China had for people from Japan. You say, well, aren't they all from the Pacific Rim? Aren't they all of Asian heritage? Yes, they are. But that war and what the Japanese did on their invasion impacted everything. Do you realize that there are still generations of elderly people of Chinese descent? If you were Chinese and you fell in love with a Japanese male or female, Do you make the connection? So the idea that Moses has married this woman from Cush, it's not just that she's a person with darker skin, it's a person who doesn't belong because of the history of these two nations. But I want you to think about something. Could you back up with me to Exodus chapter 12? I want you to just see a little verse that almost always gets kind of blown past a little bit. This is just a strange one. Look at Exodus 12. This is really interesting to me. I'm going to begin in verse 31, but I'm going to ask you to read along with me. Don't read ahead. Don't do that. But you'll see what I think we're going to hit. Let's begin verse 31. You ready? So this is the Exodus. During the night, Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, leave my people, you and the Israelites. Go worship the Lord as you have requested. Take your flocks and herds, as you have said, and go. And also bless me." Fascinating point. Verse 33. The Egyptians urged the people to hurry and leave the country, for otherwise, they said, we'll all die. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added, carried it on their shoulders in kneading troughs wrapped in clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked Egyptians for articles of silver and gold and for clothing. The Lord had made the Egyptians favorably disposed toward the people, and they gave them what they asked for, so they plundered the Egyptians. Verse 37. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. There were about 600,000 men on foot besides women and children. Now everybody look at verse 38 and highlight it. Verse 38, ready? Many other people went up with them. Does everybody see that? If you were reading this in Hebrew, it says, I quote, a mixed multitude went up with them. Now you pick up on what's happening. As the people of Israel are leaving Egypt, there's a bunch of people that leave with them because they've come to believe in the God of the people of Israel, travel the journey of the people of Israel. So it shouldn't surprise us if later on we find out that Moses married one of those women. Now, how did we do on Bible study? Right there. How many of you know a little bit more than you knew when you started? Right? So, does it seem strange that Miriam and Aaron pick on this? But how many of you have noticed that if you really want to spread a false testimony about someone, make sure you pick a touchy issue? Right? Make sure you pick a touchy issue. So Susan grew up in Kokomo, Indiana. And way down in Kokomo. That's not the same Kokomo. Okay. But how many of you are familiar with that part of Indiana a little bit? It is General Motors and Chrysler to the max. Her hometown had this massive General Motors installation, Delco Electronics. And that's where her dad worked, okay? And there's a huge Chrysler transmission plant there. So in the city we lived in, when we lived in Indiana, was Anderson, okay? Anderson had a Delco Remy General Motors plant and Inland Fisher Guide, which was also a General Motors plant. In 1962, in a county of 250,000 people, General Motors employed 42,000 people. Dude, isn't that a crazy number? Is that not a crazy number? So we moved there. We had this Ford conversion van, and one of my elders said to me that was unethical. Do you hear the language? He didn't say it was a bad idea. He said it was unethical to own a Ford in a GM town. We graduated from Harding University with Chris Kinney, who became Dr. Chris Kinney, who was a oral surgeon, right, in Anderson. For a brief amount of time, he drove a BMW until one of his patients said to him, "You got to quit driving that Hitler car." Any of the rest of you from the Midwest at all, you got any feel for this craziness? Woo! I mean, that was fighting words, people. But what I realized is if we lived in Dearborn, the ethics would have changed, right? What's Dearborn famous for? Ford. So then if you drive a GM, it's what? It's unethical, right? Pick a touchy subject if you want to do someone in. Everybody together? Pick a touchy subject if you want to do someone in. So by picking on, you realize they had other things to pick on Moses about, right? Y'all remember he killed somebody back in Egypt, right? You could have picked on that. Why not pick on that? Well, because he killed an Egyptian. They were all on board with that. I know. The Bible is awesome because it tells the truth, right? But they were all on board with him killing somebody. Don't marry the lady from Cush. This is 2022, is it not? Is this not 2022? It's amazing, isn't it? Wait a minute. You killed somebody, but that's not the big thing. The big thing is you married this lady. That's it. This is a helpful text, isn't it? To get us to start processing how this unfolds, right? Now look at Numbers 13. Numbers chapter 13. For what? Oh, 1-3. Thank you. Numbers 13. Thank you very much. Okay, everybody ready? This is a community example. What was the first one? A family example. What's the second one? Community example. Everybody ready? So the Lord said to Moses, "Send some men to explore the land of Canaan, which I'm giving to Israel. From each of the ancestral tribes, send one of its leaders." So at the Lord's command, Moses sent them from the desert of Paran. All of them were leaders of the Israelites, and here are their names. All right, everybody see that list of names, right? Scoot on down to verse 16. Scoot on down to verse 16. These are the names of the men Moses sent to explore the land. Moses gave Hoshea, son of Nun, the name Joshua. So what was Joshua's name before his name was changed? Hoshea. That means saves. Joshua means God saves. Okay? So they go into the land and they explore. That's what they do. Now, if everybody look back down to verse 26, they come back after 40 days. They came back to Moses and Aaron and the whole Israelite community at Kadesh in the desert of Paran. There, they reported to them and the whole assembly, and they showed them the fruit of the land. And they gave Moses this account. "We went into the land you sent us to, and it does flow with milk and honey. Here's its fruit. But the people who live there are powerful, and the cities are fortified and very large, and we even saw the descendants of Anak." Anybody remember why that's a big deal? Goliath. He's a descendant of Anak. That's for another study. All right, ready? Verse 29. "The Amalekites live in the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the termites." There's a lot of ites in this land. Good grief. Right? So what's the story so far? The land is good. Big challenges taking this thing. Caleb silenced the people. Before Moses said, "Oh, we should go up and take possession of the land, for we can certainly do it." But the men who had gone up with him said, we can't attack those people. They're stronger than we are. And they spread a false report among the Israelites about the land they had explored. They said, well, the land we explored devours those living in it. All the people we saw there are of great size. We saw the Nephilim. Check out the story of Noah. We saw the Nephilim there, and the descendants of Anak come from the Nephilim. We seemed like grasshoppers in our own eyes, and we looked the same to them. So they spread a what? Bad report. They bore false witness. Chapter 14. That night, all the members of the community raised their voices and wept aloud. All the Israelites grumbled against Moses and Aaron, and the whole assembly said to them, if only we died in Egypt or out there in the wilderness. Why is the Lord, remember during the sermon I brought up what a rabbi said about bearing false witness, being a false witness against the Lord. Why is the Lord bringing us into this land only to let us fall by the sword? Our wives and children will be taken as plunder. Wouldn't it be better for us to go back to Egypt? And they said to each other, we should choose a leader and go back to Egypt. Well, then Moses and Aaron fell face down in front of the whole Israelite assembly gathered there. Joshua, the son of Nun, and Caleb, son of Jephunneh, who were among those who had explored the land, tore their clothes. And they said to the entire Israelite assembly, the land we passed through and explored is exceedingly good. If the Lord is pleased with us, he will lead us into that land, a land flowing with milk and honey, and he'll give it to us. Only don't rebel against the Lord, and don't be afraid of the people of the land, because we will devour them. Their protection is gone, but the Lord is with us. Do not be afraid of them. So we have two influences, right? The 10 with the bad report, the 2 with the promise report. I didn't say good report, the promise report. What's the promise? God is going to get this done for us. Look at what happens in verse 19. But the whole assembly talked about stoning them. So what's happening? Mob mentality. Right? Think about that. Think about how many times in Old and New Testament, how many times Jesus says, ye have little faith. If I told you it's going to happen, it's going to happen. So speak the truth about what I told you. Yes. Because where are we right now? We're in our own whatever, our own wilderness, our own set of challenges. How many of you have a few giants in your own life you're facing? Right? You see that we're all up against it. But here's what's interesting. You've got these two guys who are saying, no. Lord said this would be all right. You do realize they don't win the argument. Are you guys familiar with that? They don't win the argument. Let's keep reading. So this mob threatens to kill him. Then the glory of the Lord appeared around the tent of meeting and all the Israelites. And the Lord said to Moses, how long will these people treat me with contempt? See that? How long will they refuse to, Lehman, how long will they refuse to believe in me? Right? Right? That's your point there that you just brought up. In spite of all the signs I have performed among them. So what would be some of the signs that he's performed among them so far? Crossing through the Red Sea on dry ground. What's that? Yeah, getting them out of Egypt. Who said it? Yeah, the manna from heaven, water from the rock. I mean, there's all these signs that God is with them. Why are they blind to the signs? What's blinding them? Yeah, fear. Fear's blinding them. So faith could actually help take the blinders off, right? Well, they're in trouble. Moses said, verse 13, verse 12. God says, I'll strike them down with a plague and destroy them, and I'll make you into a nation greater and stronger than them. Moses advocates for him. Moses said to the Lord, but then the Egyptians will hear about it. By your power you brought them up from among them. And they will tell the inhabitants of this land about it. They have already heard about you, Lord. They have already heard that you, Lord, are with these people, and that you, Lord, have seen, and that you, Lord, have been seen face to face, and that your cloud stays over them, and that you go before them in a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. If you put all these people to death without leaving none alive, then the nations who have heard about this report will say, well, the Lord was not able to bring these people into the land. He promised them on oath, so he slaughtered them in the wilderness. So what will be the false testimony then? Yeah, that God was incapable. The people were good, it was just they had a bad God. Well, verse 17. Now may the Lord's strength be displayed just as you have declared. The Lord is slow to anger, abounding in love, and forgiving sin and rebellion, that he will not leave the guilty unpunished. For he punishes the children for the sin of the parents to the third and fourth generation. In accordance with your great love, forgive the sins of these people, just as you have pardoned them from the time they left Egypt until now. The Lord replied, I have forgiven them, as you asked. Nevertheless, as surely as I live, and as surely as the glory of the Lord fills the whole earth, not one of those who saw my glory and the signs I performed in Egypt and in the wilderness, but who disobeyed me and tested me 10 times, not one of them will ever see the land I promised on oath to their ancestors. No one who has treated me with contempt will ever see it. But because my servant Caleb had a different spirit and follows me wholeheartedly, I'll bring him into the land that he went to, and his descendants will inherit it. Since the Amalekites and the Canaanites are living in the valleys, turn back tomorrow and set out toward the desert along the route to the sea. The Lord said to Moses to Aaron, how long will this wicked community grumble against me? I have heard the complaints of these grumbling Israelites. So tell them, as surely as I live, declares the Lord, I will do for you the very thing I heard you say in this wilderness, your bodies will fall. Every one of you 20 years old or more who is counted among the census and who has grumbled against me, not one of you will enter the land I swore with uplifted hand to make your home, except for Caleb the son of Jephunneh and Joshua son of Nun. As for your children that you said would be taken as plunder, I'll bring them in to enjoy the land you have rejected. You said your kids would be taken for plunder. Let me tell you something. They're actually going to get to enjoy the plunder that you won't get. Verse 32. As for you, your bodies will fall in this wilderness. Your children will be shepherds here for 40 years, suffering for your unfaithfulness until the last of your bodies lies in the wilderness. For 40 years, 1 year for each of the 40 days you explored the land, you will suffer for your sins. And know what it is like to have me against you. I, the Lord, have spoken, and I will surely do these things to this whole wicked community, which has banded together against me. Underline that phrase, banded together against me. They'll meet their end in this wilderness, and here they will die. So the men Moses had sent to explore the land, who returned and made the whole community grumble against him by spreading a false report about it. These men who are responsible for spreading the bad report about the land, they were struck down and died of a plague before the Lord. Of the men who went to explore the land, only Joshua the son of Nun and Caleb son of Jephunneh survived. And when Moses reported this to all the Israelites, they mourned bitterly. Early the next morning, they set out for the highest point in the hill country, saying, okay, well, now we're ready to go up to the land. The Lord promised us, surely we have sinned. But Moses said, whoa, why are you disobeying the Lord's command? This won't succeed. Do not go up, because the Lord isn't with you. You will be defeated by your enemies, for the Amalekites and the Canaanites will face you there. Because you've turned away from the Lord, he will not be with you, and you will fall by the sword. Oh, nevertheless, In their presumption, they went up toward the highest point in the hill country, though neither Moses nor the ark of the Lord's covenant moved from the camp. And then the Amalekites and the Canaanites who lived in that hill country came down and attacked them and beat them down all the way to Hormah. How long has it been since you read that whole chapter and thought through that? There's a lot in there, is there not? God said, go in. The people banded together and accused God of being unfaithful. God said, I'm not the unfaithful one here. Joshua and Caleb do what? Advocate for faithfulness, but they don't win the day. The other 10 advocate for what? Fear. They win the day. When God says, well, let me tell you how this is going to play out, then what do they say? No, don't do that. And God says, that would have been something you could have thought about just a little while ago. You all banding against me in unfaithfulness? That's not going to work out. Do you see something in here for you and for our world today? It's something, isn't it? This is part of why when I finally surrendered my heart to God and started reading the Bible to learn from Him. It's not an addiction to the Bible, it's a romance. I'm so stunned by how helpful something like this is. Because you all realize we have promised lands. God makes promises to us. And sometimes they're fearful to fulfill. Agreed? Amen? Not easy, right? So how do we today help each other live into faith when we're experiencing fear? How do we today help each other live into faith when we are experiencing fear? How do we do that? You understand what we're asking? When I hear people say, fear is the opposite of faith. I get that. But sometimes people will go on and say, and if you have fear, you don't have faith. Well, see, I don't believe that. I don't believe that at all. I think you can be struggling with fear and need help living into faith. That's my experience.
It's fear. I mean, everything from the commercials about medication and all kinds of stuff is to sow the seed of fear and doubt.
So for online and for everyone in here, Connie's point is that sometimes when you see something that is like a real tangible fear, the poisonous snake right there, the venomous snake, then the way we respond to imagined fear is similar. And those of you that have seen these studies on this, where they're using an fMRI to study the brain while these things are happening, the brain lights up the same way. Whether it's fear, real or imagined, the brain lights up the same way.
The reason we have fear and faith, or lack of faith, is because we don't have control.
All right, online and in here, did you guys hear what Lehman said? The reason that we have fear and faith, both, is because we don't have control. Right? It's a double-edged sword, isn't it? I don't have control, so I feel fearful, and I don't have control, and I need faith. Right? Here and then there and then there.
When you and I were working on my I had faith that you were going to help me get through that, we were going to get it done, because I believed that you had the knowledge and I trusted.
Yeah.
But I had fear. I was putting a pole.
Yep.
And the engineering might not have
Yes. Okay, now I have to say something. This is hilarious. So when David reached out to me for us to put this hitch on his Jeep, right? So he sends me a video. I watch this video, and that's the part I was the most fearful of, because if you cut the hole in the wrong place, it's over with. I mean, that's a done, it's like a huge thing. So I'm down there with this knife, and I'm getting ready to cut this thing. David is right here. I mean, his head is right here. We're both down there on that thing. He's afraid I'll cut in the wrong place, and I'm afraid I'll cut in the wrong place. Right? But you think it didn't help that some dude made a video who already did the process, which basically says what? It's doable. Right? So I think it's crucial. I want to make sure we don't miss this. Please hang on to this. Did you notice that both Moses and God reiterated, I have done things that prove I can do this? Moses said it, and God said it. I did these signs, I did all this stuff. And you notice that they reiterated it, some of them, didn't they? They even named them. Y'all know I did this. It's like the first century version of the YouTube video that says, play it again. If I did that, I promise you, you're good to go. That's important, isn't it? So one of the ways we help each other live into faith is help each other replay God's faithfulness, not just in Scripture, of course we need to, but in our own lives, right? That God did it before and he can what? Do it again. Louis. Ooh, I'm going to say that out loud to make sure I got it right. So Louis is bringing up the example, the family example of Miriam and Moses, and we asked the question about their blindness, and what Louis's friend said to him was, a poisoned mind makes for a blind eye. And I think that's vital, right? Right? I've been in the courthouse in Sumter County, Mississippi, where the Emmett Till trial took place. I've been there 3 times, okay? And I've gone through that 3 different times as they explore the whole thing. And you've got an eyewitness that is literally pointing at the killers. I mean, you've got an eyewitness pointing at the killers. And they still acquit them because a poisoned mind created the blind eye. Right? Oh, my goodness. Frank. Okay, this is super important. Acknowledge we have the fear and then articulate the fear. Those of you that have heard Brene Brown talk about this, she says we fear what we can't name. That's another way we can help each other, is to sit and talk through what is the real fear, right? And then Laura for our last one.
Yeah, so one of the things that I've realized, because I've helped a lot of people very early in their cancer journey, one of the things that is natural to do is search for survivors. You want to look for people that have made it.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the reasons why, and y'all may get tired of me talking about cancer, but I think it's so important because we have to, if we survive something, our ability to be a survivor to somebody else is the way God's testimony and glory goes.
Whew. So we're looking for survivors, right? Now, I'm going to just tell you all from my own point of view, I just shared this with Art a few minutes ago, is one of the reasons that I'm transparent about my own spiritual journey and my sin is because I'm not the last kid that's going to steal something. I'm not the last kid that's going to steal something. My dad isn't the last father that's going to face a kid that's made a mistake. Right? So I'm not going to pretend like some of us kind of skipped over that set of, problems, because then it leaves people without survivors. We're just not going to do that, right? We have to stop. Goodness gracious. Kenneth has gone like this. Steve's gone like this. Matthew stopped by. I am in deep trouble. Oh, man, I love you all. Thank you for this great conversation today. It doesn't have to stop here. Keep sharing, and God bless you for being here this morning. Oh, goodness.